Thanks.
How you doing here? So I'm told I point this way, not this way, to get the first slide. So that's a relief. Every one of you is already winning the game you're playing, which means that if you're unsatisfied with the results, or if there's some future scale or future size of the business or future impact that you want to make that you're not making, one way to look at that is that you're not actually playing that game. You're playing the game of winning what you've got. And so I'm going to talk today about the 5 elements of strategic genius, because strategy is really determining what game you're going to play. I think it's really a high leverage topic. Strategy is interesting because I would assert that most of you in this room have developed your strategy, your business strategy, or really your strategy for living, pretty much automatically. You know, we look at other people that are successful, and we want to copy. We kind of want what they have, so we try and copy some of the tactics that they do. And if you really sit down and consider what is your strategy, what is the strategy that you're implementing, you'll find it's usually a patchwork quilt of what you've seen other people do that has seemed to work for them. And it's nothing bad about that, except for patchwork quilts as a strategy don't tend to get you the biggest impact that you can make. They kind of hold you back from really being the kind of entrepreneur that produces the impact that you might dream of. That way. So that's me. My name's Bryan Franklin. I've helped 7 companies reach $1 billion in sales or valuation by coaching their CEOs and their management teams. So that means that in the last decade or so, I've actually had 100 years of executive meeting experience, executive strategic meetings and executive staff meetings, which either is awesome or really horrible, depending on your perspective. But I feel really lucky because the kind of people that I've been able to observe in these meetings and help reach their goals are clients like Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of PayPal and LinkedIn, the Taylor Stansbury, who's the CTO of VMware. Before that was the VP of engineering at Ariba, and actually the real strategic geniuses that I've worked with, like at Apple and Google and other places, aren't even the people whose names you know. And I've started to see a pattern over the last 100 years of meetings I've been in of which strategies end up really working out and which ones don't. And I tend to work with my clients for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, which means that when you remember what they were saying, 3 years ago about what was going to happen, and then you're seeing what's happening today, you get to map, these kinds of things actually turned out the way they thought, and these kinds of things were way, way, way off. Because in some ways, having a good strategy can feel like you're actually seeing the future, predicting what's going to happen, and then positioning yourself to be in the right place. So in addition to coaching these executives, my wife, Jennifer, and I'm, by the way, I think I'm most famous for marrying Jennifer. And so many of you have seen the wedding pictures on the internet. I've seen, more people now come up to us and say, "Oh my God, you're Jennifer Russell and Bryan Franklin." And we're like, "Yeah, we're these awesome business coaches and whatnot." And no, I saw your wedding pictures. And it was an epic wedding. And she and I together select 40 of the most exciting entrepreneurs every year. And we get together for a year-long experience where we build together a culture of contribution. And a culture of contribution is simply one where each person seeks to make the biggest contribution in every action, every interaction, and every transaction. And what I'd like to do is actually create that now here with you. So you probably can feel in yourself a desire to make money, a desire to be successful, a desire to look successful to others. You probably can feel in yourself a desire to, way back in the background, to prove to mom and dad that you made it, to look sexy and get laid. Some of the things that Chris Haddad was talking about yesterday, those lower level Maslow desires, you probably can feel those present now. And you also can feel present a desire to do good in the world, a desire to help people, a desire to take the things that are easy for you, that other people struggle with, and make it easy for them. And can you feel all of that kind of going on? And the strategy that you're now implementing is the strategy which is the average of all of those desires, right? And it's the best strategy when you average those. So what I'd like to do today is really highlight more the latter. Relax your worry, if you have it, about being enough, about belonging, about being loved, about being sexy enough, about being successful enough. Just relax your worry. You win. I promise. You win. And let's focus, on how we can make the biggest contribution, how we can give the most. It's going to help you when we're talking about these 5 aspects of strategic genius. Having that foundation of that question, how can we give the most, will make all the difference. We're about to have a kitchen utensil meeting. This actually was an invention of one of my clients. So what he discovered was if he puts a strategy meeting on the calendar, then everybody wants to be invited to the strategy meeting because we all like to think of ourselves as strategic thinkers, right? Right? If someone comes up to you and say, are you better at strategy or tactics? I don't know, 90% of you are going to say, well, strategy, of course. We're very strategic. So what he would do is, also, if someone wasn't invited to the strategy meeting, suddenly they're like, what, am I not important? This doesn't matter. If you have a team of 4 people and you invite 3 of them to the strategy meeting, then the 4th is like, well, I guess I don't matter. So he would create a kitchen utensil meeting on the calendar, which nobody wanted to come to. Just invite him, one other partner, and then they would talk strategy at the kitchen utensil meeting. And that's what we're going to do now. We're gonna have the kitchen utensil meeting. It's important because often strategy is something that has to be done yourself. I think a lot of people try to subcontract strategy to other people who seem smarter than you. Like you come to a conference like this, you see someone on stage who has a successful business. Maybe they have some numbers. Jennifer and I have created $4 million businesses. I've purchased and ran and sold 21 internet businesses. You go, oh, well, I want that, so I'm going to do that strategy. But that's really subcontracting your strategy to me, which you can't do. So have a kitchen utensil meeting where I don't want to come, where it's just you, where you really can think about what the best strategy is for you. There's a lot of confusion about strategy versus tactics. Most people say, if I ask you what's your strategy, you might say, well, I'm going to use some pay-per-click, Google, and I'm also using this search engine strategy where we do a Kindle book with the keyword in the title, and then we're going to buy some links to Kindle. So those are all tactics. Tactics are what you do in order to win the game, and the strategy is what game are you playing? Choosing the game you play. And when you start to choose the game that you play deliberately, then the strategy will just unfold. My commitment is that you guys are going to be strategic geniuses in about 32 minutes. And I believe that you can be. By choosing deliberately what game you're going to play. It makes all the difference. If you're in the Donner Party and you're coming down to the decision of, crap, do I have to eat my dead friend or die? That's a really, really tough decision. Those are really tough conditions. But those conditions and those decisions are the grandchildren of a bad strategy, which was to try to go over the pass anyway, even though it was winter, instead of waiting 3 months and going when it was safe. So there are many analogs to that strategy in your business. Trying to go fast to get something now ends up creating some really difficult conditions and really hard decisions. So the strategy isn't about how you make those difficult decisions. The strategy is playing a game that allows you to walk an easy path so that you actually create the results you want to do. A good strategy over 5, 6, 7 years can be 100 times difference in your impact and the number of customers you have and your revenue. Before we get into the first one, I wanted to tie together some things some speakers were saying yesterday in the context of strategy and what game you choose. So Chris Haddad was talking about conversion tricks, ways of getting a conversion, remember? And then some of the other speakers were talking about kind of a deeper purpose that is behind that conversion. And I don't know about you, but I felt those two to be at odds a little bit. Did you guys feel that? Yeah. So they're not at odds. And I want to untie that knot for you. I think conversion, given the right strategy, is one of the best things you could possibly focus on. But not the conversion at the point of sale. This is something I learned from Dean Graziosi. So I was at a marketing conference just like this, and person after person came up on stage with I'll say a 7-figure business, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million in revenue, something like that. And they were passionate about marketing. They were passionate about that conversion to sale and all of the amazingly, wonderfully geeky things that you can learn about that, which, I don't know, isn't there there's like an excitement in your body when you're like, oh, wow, absolutely free tests 13% better than totally free. That's really amazing. From now on, it's absolutely free. I get excited when I hear stuff like that. But so then Dean got on stage, and Dean has a $100 million business, which is an entirely different game. By the way, Dean would say that he's no smarter or better, faster, stronger, has more endurance or willpower. He would say that he doesn't have inherently better qualities that gives him the ability to run a $100 million business or to create that versus a $1 million business. When asked, he said that, well, the key difference is that he's passionate about his customers, not passionate about marketing. And what I took that to mean is he actually focuses on the conversion rate, not to sale, but to success story. So retain all of your ability to test and geek out about marketing tricks, but build copy that creates the highest conversion from lead to success story. By success story, I mean your customers actually getting the benefit that you promise. And you'll find out that there's ways of languaging, there's ways of speaking, there's emotional roller coasters that you can take the customer on when they purchase, which are different, that will attract more of the people who are likely to succeed and less of the people who are likely to buy and then either have that buyer's remorse or not do anything. So just moving, that's changing the game. Instead of playing the game of most revenue or most conversions on the landing page, play the game of most conversions on the thank you letter, I actually got what I wanted. You told me I could start my business. I started my business. I'm making $218,000 this year. Thank you. How many of those do you get per lead? And that's the conversion, that if you play that game, then a seeming conflict between the kind of techniques that Chris was talking about and the other speakers evaporates, and you can actually use all those same emotional triggers, but not just to get the sale, but actually get them to succeed. I had this oh my God, I've been so stupid my entire life kind of breakthrough. I don't know, it was about a year ago now, speaking with Jennifer, and we were frustrated that we were offering all these great steps, all these great things for some of our customers, and they weren't taking advantage of them. And we're like, why aren't they taking advantage? I mean, this is freaking solid gold. This is like the easy button to everything they say they want. They're not even pushing it. What's wrong with these people? And that's always, by the way, a strategic warning sign when you're saying, what's wrong with your customers? God, what's wrong with my customers? Pretty good indication you've got the wrong strategy. But And out of that conversation with Jennifer, what came up was, well, wait a minute. We are spending a tremendous amount of attention on what it takes to convert someone to buy. That actual buy button, that one click. We have so much attention on that one action. But then the amount of attention we have on all the actions they're going to need to do after that to have them be successful, we have no attention on. So we started to build sequences to have that call to action to take every step that a person needs to take on their own in order to actually benefit from the products and services we have. And now in our Office Autopilot account, our sequences post-sale are about 4 times longer and more complicated and more involved than our pre-sale sequences. Not just like showing the love and saying thank you and stuff like that, I mean, we do that too, but literally, hey, you know, we find that when you're taking advantage of this product, in order to have this result, a common sticking point is this one, and we want to, we want to enroll you in the idea of taking this small action which will bypass that sticking point. Those kinds of things. Really understand what's the entire journey after purchase, before success story, and build sequences that lead them that way. Okay, get off the soapbox and onto my other soapbox, which is this one. So the first element of strategic genius is to predict nonlinear trends. Okay. So if this is the past, and this is today, 90% of the people on the planet predict that the future will be this. And most trends are not linear. Most trends go like this. So let's say this is temperature, and it's getting colder and colder and colder and colder and colder. Strategic genius is to build an ice cream cone stand. Because first of all, they'll be cheap, no one wants one, and everyone will say you're crazy, because everyone is predicting it's going to keep getting colder until the Earth completely freezes over. And then the cycle comes around, it gets warmer again, and people want ice cream cones, and you've got the stand. So predicting these nonlinear trends. Another example, which I love, is Oreo cookies. The CEO of Procter & Gamble, I think Procter & Gamble was that owned the Oreo brand at the time. Is that right? Nabisco, sorry, thank you. CEO of Nabisco, thank you, said to the brand manager for Oreo, I want you to come up with a diet Oreo. Because the trend was that the word diet in the supermarket was going to increase sales, right? This was the days of Tab Cola, right? And diet everything. So I want you to come up with a diet Oreo. And the brand manager, he went, she was a woman, went to the R&D group, and they really worked on this diet Oreo, and it just wasn't working. And she actually predicted a backlash from the consumers against sort of the penalize yourself mentality of diet foods. And so they developed the Oreo double stuff. So the CEO said, come up with a diet Oreo, and she said, okay, I've got my diet Oreo. We're calling it double stuff. It's got twice the lard. And it was the most successful Oreo product since the beginning of Oreo, and totally revitalized that brand. So that's one of my favorite nonlinear trend examples. But you want to see the longer term cycles, generational cycles. And when everyone thinks it's going to go kind of more in one direction, think to yourself, well, what if it reversed, and what would be the indications that it might reverse? And then place your ice cream cone stand there. So that's first element, is that the strategic geniuses predict nonlinear trends. The second is try to change your customer behavior the least. Now, how many of you are in the business of changing customer behavior, like transformation of some kind, or getting them to change their behavior? Which is great, and me too. And we want to change our customers' behavior the most. right? The more we change our customer behavior, the better the testimonial. You know, it's what we're after. But customers don't want to change their behavior. And they severely resist that change. Change is complicated. Change is hard. There have been studies that say that you actually have a limited amount of willpower for change. And if you use it on one thing that day, you don't have it to change something else that same day, which is why it's wise to only try to change one habit at a time until it becomes a new habit. So the Newton is a good example of trying to get your customer behavior to change. So do you guys know what the Newton is? Remember? All right, imagine this. This is a device that you carry around in your pocket that's connected to something called the internet. And you can do calendaring and book your airline flights and take notes, and it's electronic. Sounds like that would work, right? Well, the Newton was a huge failure because at the time, we didn't carry our calendars in our pockets. In order to book a flight, what did you do? You called a travel agent. Everything the Newton did represented a change in customer behavior. And so it was a huge failure. Now, the iPhone was slightly less of a failure. I've heard that a few people have them. The iPhone was a huge success because they waited until customer behavior already was consistent with the technology that they were going to use. And what they did inside Apple is they tracked text messaging as a trend. It's happening right now before our very eyes. No, it was perfectly timed. I couldn't have paid you for it. They tracked text messaging, and when text messaging started to reach critical mass, they put a green light on the iPhone project. They were first of all tracking that Asia was leading the Americas in terms of text messaging. They noticed that the Americas were following the trend in Asia, so they looked in Asia, and when it kind of tipped, when text messaging tipped, they're like, okay, now people are used to typing on their phones. So they can now type, instead of text, they can type into the application, and that's a small enough behavioral change that it'll work. So think about this in terms of macro terms, but also micro terms. Changing your customer behavior the least is one of the reasons why removing one click from your shopping cart can increase conversions. It's not that people are really lazy and don't like to click. It's because the more behavior you ask of someone, the lower their ability to change goes down. And they still have to have a lot left in that tank in order to make the changes they're going to need to make in order to actually take advantage of your product or service. So the worst strategy I can think of is to come up with a totally new way to do something that achieves the same result that they already achieve. And if you listen to most ideas and inventors and business ideas, that's exactly what they are. I've got a totally new way to do something that everyone else already does some other way. And that new way, we all like to innovate as entrepreneurs. It doesn't work. It's a bad strategy. You want to innovate on one small thing. Innovate on how you can surround the customer's existing behavior with different results. That's an innovation that has strategic value. Okay, third element is to define a game that only you can win. My favorite example of this is the movie Moneyball. Anyone see the movie Moneyball? So this is the Oakland A's against the Yankees. And I can't remember the numbers, but the Yankees had millions and millions of dollars more to buy players' salaries than the A's did. And there's a scene where the GM of the A's is in with the scouts, and they're talking about how are they going to compete this year because they've got so little money. How are they going to buy all the best players and compete with the Yankees and the other sports teams, just in terms of even getting players because of salaries. And in this scene, Brad Pitt, playing the general manager, said, "We can't play Yankees ball. We can't, if we use the same evaluation criteria that the Yankees do, and we just go to bat with them, but we have less fuel in the tank, we're just going to get creamed. We cannot play their scouting game and win." And the same is true of you. You cannot play the same game that the leaders in our industry are playing and beat them. However, there's a different game. There's a different way of seeing it. There's a different mechanism. There's a different advantage that only you have, that if you play the game that relies on that, then you can win. And that's exactly what happened. I don't think they actually beat the Yankees in the World Series, but they went 6 games or 7 games. And making the playoffs at all was a major, major coup. So you want to define the game that only you can win. I have another client, one of the companies that's reached $1 billion in valuation. He's done it twice. And I said, "Tell me, how do you decide what market to compete in?" He kind of looked at me funny and said, "Compete." And I don't compete. Compete is doing something that someone else is already doing and trying to do it better. If someone else is already doing it, I try to do something else. So do something else and do it the way only you can. Number 4, use a multi-nodal business model. So I think this needs no explanation, right? Multi-nodal business model, what the hell? So in a system, you've got points and lines in any kind of network, right? The lines are the connections, and the points are the nodes. Does that make sense? So multi-nodal means there's more than 2 points, between connections. A binodal system, which would be 2 points, would mean that there's you and the customer. You give value to the customer gives you money. That's a binodal system. Among the fastest growing, the fastest scaling companies in the world, the best strategies, I've never seen a single one use this. If you are giving value to a customer and then getting money back, and that's the game, you're in for a long, slow slog. You're in for going over the Donner Pass instead of waiting through summer. So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is that you have at least 3. I say multinodal. I've seen it work with 5, 6, or 7. But let's say at least 3 different types of customers or partners. So you have a customer, you have a partner, you have other product creators. And you create an environment where they exchange value to each other, and you are the playground. You're the sandbox where that value is exchanged. So each of them pay to play on the sandbox, but the value is exchanged between them. Google is a perfect example of this. Right? So for Google, you've got people who have information on the internet. You've got people who want that information. And you've got advertisers who want to sell things to the people who want the information. Those are the 3 main nodes in the Google model. And Google created an environment that draws the information that wants to be found, draws the people who want the information, draws the advertisers who want the people, and they all exchange value with each other. Everybody gets what they want. And Google, just gets to take a little piece of the rake. It's a poker term for the house. The house gets a little piece of every pot. So, in other words, don't run a blackjack game where you're playing against the customer. Run a poker game where the customers are playing against each other and you get a piece of the rake. All the fastest growing companies do this. Right now, you should be thinking, well, crap, how do I do that? And you do that by thinking about what are all of the other players that surround you and the customer given the thing that they want. Who has the most at stake? What other entities, other companies, other types of people stand to gain the most if your customers are successful achieving the result that you're promising? So think about what's the result that you promise for the customer. Then imagine that tens of thousands of people are achieving that result. Who wins? Who wants that besides you, besides the customer? And start to draw in those people and create an environment where they can actually exchange that value, where they can help each other. When I'm working on a multi-nodal business model with a client, what we'll do is we'll list the customers, we'll list all the people in the environment. For the iPhone, there's AT&T, there's the people, the users, there's the app developers, right? And each of them have something and want something. And you list their haves and wants like this. AT&T has lots of subscribers. And what they want is a reason not to switch. When the iPhone came out, it was very, very common to kind of carrier surf, right? And they kept trying to penalize the customers with more and more egregious contracts. And it was becoming a worse and worse and worse brand problem, because the main reason you were staying with me is because I was going to punch you in the face if you left. It's kind of weird as a relationship with your customers. So they were racking their brains, how can we make people want to stay instead of be afraid to leave? So that's what they wanted. The people, they have the money to pay for their monthly phone, and what they want is they want mobile everything. And what the app developers have is a million things you can do online. The app developers could develop roughly 1 million times more applications than Apple could. So that's what they have, and what they want is lots of people. So these map up. The apps want the money as well, right? These map up, and these map up. So you start to mix and match, what are the haves and wants, and how do they relate to each other? And you notice that none of them are straight across, right? None of them just do two. You need all three people in the system for this all to work. Does that make sense? So how do you do that in your business? And that is probably the most valuable question you could possibly ask. If you spend the plane ride home or the drive home thinking, how can I do that in my business? How can I do that in my business? Then what you do for the next year or 2 years could be a 10, 20, 50, 100 times difference in your net worth. Just this one question. And then the last is be flexible with your identity. When I ask you, tell me about your company, tell me about yourself as an entrepreneur, most people are trained to talk about what you do. Well, we provide this, right? And if you're really slick and you've done some internet marketing homework, you'll say, well, our niche is this particular identity, which is very narrowly defined and clever, and the awesome and preposterous result that we continually achieve for our clients, as if by magic, is this other thing. Wow, it's amazing. I'm so glad we met. I know all these people that fit your niche that I have to introduce you to. But still, that can become a fixed identity. And strategic geniuses do not look at the road ahead based on who they are, who they serve, and what they do. They look at the road ahead by what's the world they want to live into. If you imagine a utopian world, what is the picture of that world? What assets do I currently have, and how can I use those assets to create that world? It's a conversation Jennifer and I have every year. All right, what's the world we want to create? What are our assets? We have some goodwill. We know how to do some things. We've got some money. We've got some projects. We've got these people willing to do this. How can we kind of mix and match those assets and utilize them to create that world? A wonderful example of this was my father worked at one point in his life for Southern Pacific Railroad. And he was hired for Southern Pacific Railroad because he was, his previous job was working for the company, the very first company that made fax machines. Now, the heck does Southern Pacific Railroad want with an executive who had built a company selling fax machines? Well, at the time, Southern Pacific had this policy where every company, every subsidiary of Southern Pacific Railroad had to start with SP. So they wanted him to start a SP company of some sort, and they had to figure out what the heck are they going to do with all the land they own, right? That's the biggest asset that railroad has, is these huge stretches of land that are very narrow and very long, right? And so after they dismissed extremely long lap pools, it was about the time of deregulation in the telecommunications industry. So for the first time ever in America, it was permissible to compete for long-distance services, and the long-distance company and the local company didn't have to be the same company. That regulation was released. So what they decided to do with their asset is lay fiber optic cable. And my dad was one of the founding members of Sprint, which was their solution to how do we take advantage of this deregulation and these long stretches of land that we own, which nobody wants to ride the train on anymore. And I think the Sprint's history speaks for itself. So be flexible with your identity. If Southern Pacific Railroad thought it was a railroad company, it would never be able to even think of that idea. So the last Polaroid camera, called the Polaroid 2. Remember the Polaroid camera? Shake it like a Polaroid picture. The last Polaroid camera that came out, just guess the year. What year do you think the last Polaroid camera came out? 95, 90? It was 2002. It was 2002. And their competitive advantage was this was a Polaroid camera, which was a disposable Polaroid, where you took the pictures and then threw the camera away. And that was their attempt to compete with digital photography. So, somewhere, some way, at Polaroid, there could have been an executive that said, what are our assets? What do we understand? And what's the future? And then how do we participate most powerfully in that future? And they could have led digital photography rather than trailed it. So those are the 5 areas of strategic genius. And if you're able to incorporate all 5 in your strategy, in how you define the game that you're playing, then your road can be relatively easy, relatively easy, like the speaker yesterday was saying. And you can find yourself on a nice, comfortable climb where next year when I see you at a conference like this, you could have double the number of employees that you have now. You could have 4 times the revenue that you have now. It's totally doable. Not because you want more for you, but because you want to contribute more. Because you want to make a bigger difference. And you can't make a bigger difference being strategically myopic. And anyway, so I guess what I want you to take away is strategic genius isn't something that other people have. It's a series of 5 considerations that you're more than capable of thinking about and making. And the more you incorporate those into your every 6 month or every year of like, hey, what do I want to do? What's up for me next? The more successful you'll be. So I have just a couple minutes left. I wanted to real quickly go through 3 trends that I see, just to try and help you out. And then we can take maybe 1 or 2 questions. All right, trend number 1. There's no privacy. There's going to be even less privacy. I was working with a company recently whose competitive advantage is that they're bringing privacy back to the web. I don't think so. And there are generational trends that suggest that privacy will continue to evaporate for another 2 generations or so, and then it's going to come roaring back. But 2 generations is a long time to wait for customers, so no privacy. Second, information is mostly already free. It's going to be more and more free. Currently, information is free, but models that teach you how to use that information, you pay for. And most of the information marketers here actually are selling models, selling compression on that information. Does that make sense? Well, the models are next. The models are going to be free. And anytime you're involved in a trend like this, so if you have a business selling private information, for example, don't resist the trend. Get in front of it. When I was in the entertainment business doing post-production sound for film, I was always at the end of the process. And the directors always wanted to make their decisions as late as possible in the game. You know, let me make that decision later, let me make that decision later. And I tried to penalize them more and more and more for making their decisions late, because it was really hard on me when they didn't make their decisions in time. And then it hit me, wait a minute. What if I actually went with that trend and pushed the decisions even later and chose as a competitive advantage that I was going to allow them to make all the decisions they could as late as possible. And I'd actually be strategic with them. I'd map out all the decisions they have to make and make the biggest ones as late as possible and show them how they could make the decisions even later, which I began to do. And I doubled my revenue that year. So don't fight the trend of information being free. Push it. And then every strategic meeting that I've been in for the last 2 years, some executive says, what are we going to do about short two-way mobile video? Because if there's not a short two-way mobile video component of our product in the next 5 years, we're going to be dead. So start to build in now the platform that you're going to need so that when short two-way mobile video is happening and there's a cheap application that you can incorporate to take advantage of it, whether it's in your customer service, your product delivery, your sales process, your sales videos, your product launches, you know, start to envision ways that this is going to happen and start to build the slow, clunky text versions of them now. And I heard about an amazing product launch last night where in the product launch, they had the customers get into teams and compete with each other. It's an awesome idea. During the product launch, compete for actually achieving the kinds of results that you can achieve with the product. So how do you know, can you envision a future where all your customers are talking to each other with short two-way video hosted by you on specific topics that guide them through the thinking that they're going to need to have not only to convert into buying your product, but to actually take advantage and be successful? You know, if you have a dating product, imagine during the product launch you're setting up a video environment where the customers are auditioning how they're going to be and what's their presence like, what are they going to say, and using some of your techniques and trying it out with each other and then grading each other and then posting those grades inside the idea of the product launch. So start to think about how you're going to use short two-way mobile video, because it's going to be one of the most important financial leverage points coming up. Okay, I want to meet you, especially if you have $1 million business or more-ish and you want to change the world. If you're in that $1 million range and you want to change the world, change the more. If you're in the $1 million range or more and you want to change the world, I want to meet you and you want to meet me. We've got something really, really exciting that it's going to blow your mind, so we want to talk. And then if you're a sick genius with HTML5 or any of the browser-side magic that can be done now, you know, Ajax, you probably know more about it than me. If you don't, then you're probably not the sick genius. I want to meet you because there's some other projects that Jennifer and I are involved in in terms of creating the contributor culture on a really wide scale that we'd love for you to participate in. So we especially want to meet you if you're these people. And if you're not, we still want to meet you because I just fucking love people and want to help them all the time. So happy to. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.